What a well-cited expert witness report looks like, a case of compartmental syndrome. In medical litigation, expert witnesses are often judged not only by what they say, but by the medical literature that they rely on. And in a recent case involving delayed diagnosis of forearm compartmental syndrome, the plaintiff's expert, who I'm just going to call Dr. L, he submitted a set of sources to support his opinion that I thought was worthy of jumping on and doing a video about. He cited 16 sources in total, and what stood out to me wasn't just what he cited, it was how strategic and purposeful these choices were. In this video, I'm going to look at 4 that I think deserve our attention and scrutiny. The first one is a systematic review from 2011, and you can see it's entitled Compartmental Syndrome of Forearm, and it was published in the Journal of Hand Surgery. It's a very well-respected, well-established journal with very clear, transparent, and strong methods. It pulled together 84 cases spread out across 12 retrospective studies, and it broke down the cause, the diagnostic strategies, the outcomes, and the complications. Now, this was a really strong choice to frame the issue and to demonstrate the clinical awareness, not only just the equipment, drives timely diagnosis. Now, this review, it relied entirely on level 4 evidence, mostly retrospective case studies. Now, sometimes that could be a very weak choice, but not in this case. It's just a simple reflection of the field of existing data that we have to work with. Forearm compartmental syndrome is very rare. It happens suddenly and often in trauma settings. And so it carries a very serious set of consequences if you miss it. And you cannot ethically randomize patients into a treat and let's wait and see groups. That's just not possible. We cannot do that. It also, emergencies like this, they're not going to wait for prospective protocols. That's why most of the evidence for this syndrome, it's going to come from chart reviews and case series. In other words, level 4 was the absolute best possible data that we had. And a systematic review was the very smartest way to make sense of this situation. The next source we're going to look at is a device accuracy study that was published in the Journal of Bone and Joint Surgery. So again, a very well-respected, well-established journal. And this looks at 3 devices that are used to measure compartment pressure. And for context purposes, why this is important is because one of the seeds that the defense was trying to plant was that, hey, the device that we were using, it's known to be glitchy, it's known to be problematic, you should probably go after the device manufacturer. They were trying to set that up as a possible defense. So that's why this article is a very important inclusion. It supports the argument that no, the device is actually pretty reliable and pretty accurate. So it's anticipating where the cross-examination might go. So another really strong choice by Dr. L. This next source that I'm going to discuss is a real classic. It was published in 1976, and it's entitled The Wick Catheter Technique for Measurement of Intramuscular Pressure. And at the time, this was a very clinically cutting-edge tool, and it was one of the first widely discussed techniques for measuring compartmental pressure. Now, normally citing a 50-year-old article, that's going to raise some eyebrows, and that's one of the things that initially got my attention. But there's a lot of reasons for citing older literature in cases. Some of them are very legitimate, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with it. And then other times, it's underhanded. It's not ethical. It's not best practice. I don't think it's a genuinely good choice. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for picking an older source. 5 of the most likely, in my opinion, are Number one, to show that a principle has long been established. In this case, that increased intercompartmental pressure, it's measurable and dangerous, and it's been known for a very long time. I think it's very likely one of the reasons why Dr. L picked this and why it's still a very strong choice. I think another very likely reason is to build a timeline of clinical understanding and how it's evolved over time. So from our early measurement tools to today's standards. Again, I think that's probably a very likely explanation of why this older article was chosen. I see a lot of experts also pick older sources because newer literature did not support their argument. So they had to reach back for older and older sources that were more favorable to their opinion. I don't think that's what's going on in this particular situation, but I do see that a lot of times. The fourth possible reason is sometimes there can just be due to a gap in available modern evidence, especially for very niche scenarios. I don't think that's what's going on in this case because although there's not a glut of literature on compartmental syndrome of the forearm, there's been a steady stream of different types of sources. So I don't think that that is the reason in this situation. We can also see it just simply out of habit. Sometimes older experts, they remember reading something when they were in residency or medical school, and it stuck with them. And so when they're like, oh, okay, I'm going to opine on this case. I remember this study. I keep coming back to it every few years or every 10 years. I'm going to pull that into my report. I don't think that's what's going on in this situation, but I do see that sometimes. Another possible reason can be just limited search skills of the expert. They just kind of got into PubMed and put in a couple keywords, and what they found was what they worked with. I don't think that that is what's going on with Dr. L because he had a lot of very strong choices in his literature, a really robust mix of sources, and his report was quite strong in the medical literature. So I think the first two reasons I named are probably most likely. He picked this to show that a principle has been long established, and then also to build a timeline of our clinical understanding and how it's evolved. I think, frankly, Dr. L appears to be showing that the dangers of compartmental syndrome, they've been known and measurable for decades, and that's why he pulled on this older source. This final source that we're going to look at, it's very unusual, but it's a very interesting choice. And this is an online-only article published in the Scientific American, and it's about a public figure, a reporter, who lost part of his arm due to compartmental syndrome. Now, this article, it's not peer-reviewed, not even close, and it would never pass as expert evidence. So why in the world did Dr. L choose it and include it? Well, I think when you pair this with the clinical literature, it acts as an effective bridge between science and story. It makes the plaintiff's plight real, and that urgency very real and palpable. I think, it's a narrative that the jury can connect with, and it really will resonate with them. So while the technical papers and the dense medical evidence, that does the heavy lifting and that lays the scientific base and foundation you need as an expert, I think that this serves a different purpose, and I think it was a really interesting, well-done choice by Dr. L, and that's why it jumped out at me. And you also rarely see non-peer-reviewed sources cited in an expert report. So my final takeaways for this case study, what really impressed me about Dr. L and the sources that he used was that each of them, it served a very different purpose. If we think back to the first systematic review we looked at, that review framed the issue very nicely, and it gave us a good number of identical cases to look at, comparing apples to apples. The next source we looked at was the device study, and that reinforced an objective measurability, and that was going to really kind of head off one of the avenues the defense was going with this, which was, hey, this medical device that we use to track compartmental pressure, that's pretty wonky. That probably failed in this case. Don't come after us, don't blame us, go after the medical device manufacturer. So that device study really did, kind of acted as a strong defense tool. The next paper we looked at, the older one from the 70s, it's a classic paper and it added historical weight. And then this one we just looked at, it really added a human context and an important human element. So I feel like his strategy was very thoughtful, and Dr. L's model of his sources that he included was worth studying. Because when expert witnesses choose their literature carefully, their opinions don't just sound stronger, they stand up better under pressure. I'm Michael Graham from Graham Med Legal. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you want to reach out to me, you can find me on LinkedIn or through my website, and please give my Substack a follow, where I look at med mal cases every week and mass tort cases. Thank you very much.